Hello and welcome to Sansad TV. You're watching Viewpoint with me, Frank RAUSAN PEREIRA. Well, India is doubling down to build new strategic petroleum reserves at 6 proposed locations in a quest for energy security in a volatile world. Emergency oil reserves that are stocked up, at several places tend to be released at times of exigencies and are crucial for the world's third largest energy consumer, which imports 85% of its crude requirements. A media report quoting sources said that the government has asked state-run Engineers India Ltd to make detailed feasibility reports to build such new reserves at 6 locations. This has come up due to the rising tensions in West Asia. Earlier this month, during the height of the Iran-Israel conflict, there was fear that Iran would block the Strait of Hormuz, thereby impacting India's oil imports. It is in this context that we will analyze how to secure India's energy needs. Joining me on the program today are Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, career diplomat. Thank you to my guests for joining me on this edition of Viewpoint. Ambassador, let me start the program with you first. Let's look back at what happened in West Asia. Of course, right now there is a fragile truce, but there was a brief period in between where there was a scare that the Strait of Hormuz would be closed and hence impacting India's oil imports. And that is why, you have media reports and others talking about energy security as well. So how would you look at it from that perspective?
Thank you, Frank. Frank, it's always good to be with you, and after a long time. I must say that all through in the last 45 years or so, the world, especially the region and India, have hoped that the conflict between Israel and Iran will not happen or will somehow be averted. But we have seen that it did happen, and it has been virtually on the verge of it. So our 4 key interests as far as India is concerned with the Middle East or West Asia are defined by the 4 E's in mind. First, on top of it is energy security. As you rightly mentioned, 70 to 80% requirements have been sourced from West Asia. We have our expats, 9.5 million, whose safety and security is more important than even the energy supplies in that sense. If there is a conflagration in the region, what do you do about that? And then the economic engagement. Increasingly, India has been a very major investor. We have invested nearly $80 billion in UAE. Thousands of companies are working there. UAE and Saudi Arabia are our 3rd and 4th largest trading partners. We have INSTC Chabahar port. We are working on the IMEC. So engagement has been very, very significant. And last T is the ease of navigation and the maritime connectivity, sea lanes of communications, on which 80% of our trade depends. So therefore, if there is a destabilization due to escalation, then it is going to have a direct impact on India's economic health, and overall challenges will increase. Fortunately, it has been averted this time. There was a real threat of the Hormuz being closed. And on the other hand, we have seen what the Houthis have been doing for last quite some time, that it has increased costs to the rest of the world and has been very successfully prevent the maritime trade. It has happened. Coming via Cape of Good Hope means adding several problems for yourself apart from the cost. What has India done in the meantime is, and it has happened since the Russia-Ukraine war. The more importantly, although Iraq, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar and all are our important partners, Iran, as you know, we used to import about 12%, which due to the American sanctions was completely stopped, virtually to a zero. So India has diversified in the wake of the Russia-Ukraine war. It started importing about 40% of its requirements from Russia. Now, then we are also going around all over, that is in Latin America or in Africa with Angola, Nigeria and all, which account for a great part of our requirements. So diversification is basically the key. You cannot depend on one source while you are yourself trying to work on various kind of energies like the renewable energy, nuclear and others. So reserves are very important, but the reserves can only last for maximum 35 days. Right now, what we have is just about 10 days reserves, about 35 million, I think, tons of crude that we can store at the moment. Of course, several countries have also said that they could do it for us. But the whole purpose is how to transport it. So when do you need it? So caves, caverns, and all kinds of, as you mentioned, that PPP model is also being followed in this regard.
Sure.
So I think that India is emerging, taking all the steps that are necessary, and we have seen Minister Hardeep Puri speaking that we have already addressed the issues in case Hormuz was blocked. I mean, it could be for 7 days, it could be 10 days, up to 10 days, you could handle it. But beyond that, with the current reserves, would have been very difficult to do so.
Points very well taken. Let me take the points that you're making forward with Mr. Taneja. Mr. Taneja, like the ambassador has just pointed out, of course, India has been diversifying its sources of oil that has been coming into the country. So that is one way of dealing with our energy security needs. Another way, of course, is that of strategic petroleum reserves. There are several media reports suggesting that we are looking at ensuring that we have more of this so that if there is some issue like we just saw in West Asia, then probably we can be better prepared. How do you look at this?
Well, there are two ways to look at it. One is short term and the other is long term. When you look at India's economy, all said and done, we have invested heavily and we have done very well in terms of renewables. But the fact remains we are still in an oil economy, heavily dependent on imports on the top of it. And even natural gas. Oil today, we import roughly 89% of our total requirement. That includes, of course, crude oil that we import, refine, and then sell it to 105 countries around the world. And we are a major exporter of products as petrol, diesel, turbine fuel, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, natural gas, roughly 54% of our total requirement we are importing, mainly from a country called Qatar, which is right in this at the center of the GCC region. So at the same time, we invested heavily in petroleum reserves. Now the idea is to go further to make sure that we have sufficient oil. Let's say in a situation like what we witnessed recently, that we have oil for 90 days. I mean, that's typically the norm. If you look at developed countries, OECD countries, especially the countries, who are member of the International Energy Agency, we are also associate member now. But those who are the member, they have to, make storage for 90 days. That's the norm. And China is doing the same. Other major economies are doing the same. So we are now moving in that direction. We have started working aggressively in terms of petroleum reserves, going for bilateral deals and also diversifying. Now look at, for instance, today we import crude oil roughly from 30 to 40 different geographies and regions. Including Russia is the new addition. In fact, we were importing hardly 2% of total requirement oil from crude oil from Russia. Now it's up almost 40%. Of course, there is economics behind it because they're giving us good, price. So that's why we're importing from there. But that's all kind of, for economy like ours, which is oil-based and at the same time growing very fast. We are among the fastest growing economies in the world. And ideally, we should be growing at 10%, which means that we will require more oil. Today, we consume roughly 5.5 million barrels of oil every day. We are the third largest consumer of oil on the planet. But if we really want to go to 10% GDP growth, probably we will be consuming maybe 6.8 or 6.9 million barrels of oil every day. As I said, since we are still an oil economy. Now, that is the kind of situation. So we can create more storage, but at the same time, we can go for some bilaterals with friendly countries and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we have two options. One is that, we go more aggressively for renewable energy or the green energy. We invest more in nuclear power. And at the same time, we buy oil and gas assets overseas, like the China has done. China is a major producer of oil, and 50% of oil that they produce actually happens in other geographies, not in China. So I think we need to also invest more aggressively in maybe in Russia, in Latin America, or in Africa, wherever we can find oil, the equity oil. That's one. Second is, of course, that we build more refineries overseas and we go for partnership and also bring partners into India and to invest into India's exploration and production on our basis. We are not as lucky as Russia, Iran, or Iraq, or Saudi Arabia, but geologists say that we have plenty of gas, especially in the Bay of Bengal and Andaman region and so on and so forth. So we need to bring in technology partners or maybe even equity partner and exploit that as far as possible. But as I said, energy security, but here we are talking basically mapping next 20 years. But when
Right.
you look at our size and our requirement and the kind of emergence of India as a major power, and we want to be a superpower like the United States or China and so and so forth, we can't do that without energy. So we have to go for energy independence. We have to go beyond energy security. That is energy independence, which means that we produce our own energy or we bring energy from sources which we own in different parts of the world. So therefore, two
Absolutely.
directions. One measure is that more oil, more gas, and more, of course, coal, which is kind of domestic resource. But at the same time, invest more in nuclear power and fusion, of course, a new technology, as you know. So it's a very complex situation. And I can tell you that 80% countries are kind of importing energy. 80% energy. 80% countries on the planet are energy deficit. We are not the only one. Japan is energy deficit. China is also energy deficit. Korea is energy deficit. And the United States, the major producer of oil, is also a major importer of oil. So it's more complex. So what we have, I think the government has taken right initiatives, and I think we are moving with the killer instinct. My own sense is that we need to kind of be a little bit more aggressive. Our doctrine direction is very clear, but we need to involve private sector. We need to bring in foreign players and so on and so forth to make sure that we have plenty more oil available, more gas available, more coal available, and even in renewables, we are producing cells, panels, etc., in our country and not dependence on imports for that.
Points very well taken. Okay, let me take the points that you're making forward with Ambassador Trigunayath. Now, Ambassador, energy independence, I'd like that phrase, and we'll take that particular aspect forward. Invest in areas like Africa, Latin America, maybe a little more in Russia, etc. What are your thoughts on that, first and foremost? Secondly, of course, you're looking at renewables and looking at cleaner and greener forms of energy. We have the International Solar Alliance. India seems to be working with like-minded countries around the globe to try and get this done as well. Your thoughts?
Well, I fully agree with Mr. Taneja, what he has said, and that we need to have one work towards self-reliance in energy as far as possible. But that is not going to be possible. That will be very difficult, at least for next 30, 40 years. Our dependence on the hydrocarbons is going to continue to remain very, very evident and required. If we are going to grow at the rate of 8 to 10%, then obviously we'll require more energy. And therefore, we'll have to see how we are going to produce energy. We are going also with the climate change, our goals till 2070 or even before, to have a zero kind of a thing. So that will be a very ambitious target at the moment. We are hoping to do it before. But what we are doing in the renewables definitely is very good. As far as investments abroad is concerned, I have been involved with several places. It is not very easy. It's very, very difficult process. We have been part in Nigeria. We had about 8 blocks. We couldn't produce. I was in Libya. We had several blocks there. We have problems. It could not work out. In Syria, we had a block. We had to give up. And same thing applied in Iran. We had the gas field there also for that. That did not work out. So you continue to invest, continue to explore, and then eventually you find that due to domestic situation, due to some other problems, that you are unable to continue with the explorations. One of the most successful explorations that India has done was in Russia. Again, I was present there at the time when we took 20% of the Rosneft, and that has paid off many times over. Thereafter, we tried very hard with the Russians to get some kind of more blocks and all. It has not been very successful. It's only very recently that we have seen the 2 private players have got into the bargain and started working on some kind of thing. So doing these things is very important to invest in those. But the fact that it is a long-term process, number one, in exploration, it takes very long. It's like the same thing as in India. You keep trying and finally you may dig the oil or you may not get it. That has also happened. So I think that we'll have to apply all kinds of ways and paths that are available to us and try and defend as much as we can. And hopefully, as has been said, that we might have a lot of gas available, so we'll have to diversify that. Likewise, in the hydrogen is another area in which India has really taken a very big mission of a national hydrogen mission, or whatever it is. So it has to be pursued further. Biofuel alliance that we have signed, that is also another thing that can help in our transport sector and the energy sector. So I think that there are a lot of ways and permutations and combinations, but there is no uniform solution as long as you don't become independent as far as energy is concerned.
Absolutely, and I think that's going to be the difficult task of trying to become independent, at least in the near future. It seems to be an uphill challenge. But that having been said, Mr. Taneja, we are doing everything that we possibly can. Something that the ambassador just touched upon about, using everything that is available to us. You have ethanol blending, you have biofuels. We've been doing wonderfully as far as renewables are concerned. Well on target to achieve our target over the next 5 years. So, but is that sufficient? How do we scale up? How do we ensure that all of this pushes us and leverages us towards, being completely independent as far as energy is concerned?
Well, when I talk about energy independence, I've done my own, research on that. We are talking about by 2050, not before. But we have started moving in that direction, but I think 2050, not before that. But that should be our goal. A country of our size, our ambition, we cannot be so heavily dependent on imports. Name one major country. I'm not talking Japan, I'm talking of emerging economy, large economy. At the same time, yes, I agree with the ambassador. It's always a challenge. It's not easy to go out and set up joint ventures or invest in oil and gas assets. But look, China has done it. Japan is doing it. Even small Malaysia is doing it. And let's not forget one thing, they are super majors like Total Energy, British Petroleum, ExxonMobil. Majority of their assets are overseas, not in their home countries. So they've done it and they're still doing it. There are challenges, of course. Now, at the same time, I think, we need to kind of find a way. Look at Sakhalin 1 project, which Ambassador also touched upon. It has been a great success. Even initial days, early, 2003 or 2004, when we invested, that was the first major investment, was in Greater Nile project in Sudan. We invested 700 crore or something, if I remember right. It has already given us back, in multiples. So, we need to kind of, yes, the mortality rate sometimes can be high, but at the same time, because it depends on geopolitics, it depends on so many other factors. But that does mean we just need to rework our strategy, see how the Chinese are doing, how Malaysia is doing, how Total is doing, how ExxonMobil is doing. Our Prime Minister recently visited Guyana. And one of the major things behind the idea was that if we could invest in Guyana, which is a kind of new kid, as far as E&P landscape is concerned. So I think that's the approach we need to follow. And the world will remain what world is, But the point is, at the same time, geologists say that domestically, especially when it comes to oil, we are not as lucky as many other countries are. So what do we do in such a situation? Even for instance, renewable energy, we have done very well. Look at solar for them. We've done extremely well. We are in fact being talked about the world over. But that at the same time, most of that has been basically solar connected with the grid. Now the government is focusing more on distributed solar so that villages can become autonomous. They produce their own electricity and they basically go for something like the Solar Republic. It's nothing to do with the grid. So that's a different model. And the government is now pushing that very, very aggressively. If you saw the last budget, a lot of incentives have been offered in that direction. Nuclear, we are already investing heavily there, but it's still the share of nuclear in the overall India's energy mix is very, very small. So for next 20 years, we need more hydrocarbons. We need more coal so that we can transition to greener fuels without compromising with our growth rate. As I said, we need 9% minimum in order to become, $30 trillion economy as soon as possible. So there are many challenges. But my point is that if we just say that, look, ethanol and all that, great, but we can blend, we are already doing that. But don't forget, ethanol, we have to keep the food security in mind. Somewhere we should make sure that we're not compromising with the agricultural growth rate. Because we are exporter and we are heavily dependent on that when it comes to 65% of our population. So there are many challenges. So my point is that we need more oil, and for that, if we don't get it at home, we have no option but to go and invest overseas or go for kind of alliances or deals or joint ventures with independent oil companies or NOCs of the world so that we can feel more secure than we do, for instance, today. Number 2, nuclear. And nuclear, I think, is one area. If 2070 and beyond is all going to be renewable energy, mainly solar and nuclear. And don't forget one thing, even when we talk of solar, sun is also a nuclear reactor. Sun is a God-made nuclear reactor. So it's the same thing. So solar and nuclear are going to be the major thing 2070 and beyond. Hydrogen, yes, there's a lot of talk about hydrogen, but we are still 7 years away from hydrogen when we talk of technology and we talk of economic viability.
Right.
So those are ideas for the future. We are very good. The government has launched the hydrogen mission and all that. We're working in all directions, but all said that and done. Realistically speaking, when it comes to India's energy security, the fact is we need more oil, we need more natural gas, we need more coal, and we need more renewable energy. And that's next 20 years. And after that, you will see that renewable energy is going to occupy more space in India's energy, mix. And nuclear 2070 and beyond is going to occupy almost 40% space, hopefully. So these are all the kind of scenario we are talking about. We need to be realistic. Oil especially is tough and difficult. Oil is 90% geopolitics. We all know that. We just saw that last week. But at the same time, we have to be realistic and we have to push both the government companies and the private sector wherever possible with the international participation. Go and achieve this target that to the extent possible, 50% of oil that we consume every day is coming from the sources either in India or owned by us overseas.
Perfect. Absolutely. All right. Time to get closing comments now from both my panelists with what next and the best way forward. Starting first with the Ambassador.
Well, I think that we have to work on all fronts and for getting the energy security ensured. It is a difficult task, but we have done so well so far. And I think we'll continue to work in this direction even more because the world also looks up to us. As far as the renewable energy is concerned, we have acquired the leadership and we'll have to push in that direction as well.
Okay. And Mr. Taneja, please close. Yeah.
Yeah, we are a fossil fuel economy as of today. And when it comes to energy transition, with greener energy, greener sources of energy and all that, it's important that we basically write our own narrative. We are going to do this on our terms, our conditions, and what works for us. Energy transition has to be socially friendly, development friendly. I mean, narratives set in other parts of the world, west or east, north or south, we should not really go with that. We should set our own narrative on energy transition. And our narrative is simple. We need more oil, we need more gas, we need more coal. And at the same time, we invest heavily and aggressively in renewable energy. And this is exactly what the present government is doing.
Okay, gentlemen, we'll have to leave to that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and sharing your views and putting things into perspective for us. Well, what's coming out of this discussion is that over the next 20 years at least, fossil fuels are here to stay and are going to be the most dominant source of energy. And hence, we'll have to work towards, working with like-minded partners to try and ensure that we can be energy independent, not just securing our energy needs. We need to invest abroad and not just invest, but also ensure that it works and make it work like some of the other countries have done if we have to be energy independent, and use all ways, all means, all modes available to us to ensure that we get everything that we can out of every source of energy before we move into the next phase of renewables and that kind of energy dominating the space. With that, it's a wrap in this edition of Viewpoint. This is Frank RAUSAN PEREIRA signing off.